Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to YouTube channel Actionable Context. It's an honor to introduce you to Farrukh Rafiq, a visionary leader in supply chain and procurement management with a wealth of experience and a track record of turning insights into action. Farrukh is joining us to share invaluable strategies and insights that you can implement in your own business. Stay tuned for wisdom from a true expert. So Farrukh, welcome. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good, Balram. Thank you for having me. I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you. And where are you calling in from?
From my home right now in Northern Virginia, outside DC.
Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, there's a lot to cover in this session, and I'm really excited to learn a lot from you. With no further ado, let's dive in. Farrukh, tell us a little about your background. What moved your career in the direction of a portfolio company executive?
So, Balram, I've been in supply chain and procurement for the last 18 years. Even before that, in college, I was a supply chain major. Don't ask me how I got into it, but I really enjoyed it. Done this for about 18 years now. Started it off in a manufacturing environment for a medical devices company. Did a number of different supply chain procurement operations role. From there, I got my MBA, wanted to get into management consulting. I spent 10 years in consulting, first with Accenture, really focused on life sciences, biotech, medtech companies. And then from there on, joined a company called Alex Partners. Alex Partners is where I was exposed mostly to private equity businesses and their portfolio companies. Spent 6 years working with portfolio companies. These are generally middle market, upper middle market, smaller companies compared to some of the Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies. A company like Accenture will be working with. This is a segment I really enjoyed. These are generally smaller, more nimble business. These are a lot of acquisitions that are done by the investors, and they need the integration of these businesses. They need to drive synergy, and that's where a lot of supply chain and procurement leverage can be pulled. So that's how I got into private equity. And then one of my last clients that we had was called Artera Services, and Artera Services offered me a role as the head of their supply chain and procurement. And that's the journey I took into the private equity in the portfolio world.
That's a fantastic career path. And I guess you did your MBA in Emory, and just by the unpacking, there's so much to unpack there, the kind of experience you're holding out there. So let us dive into your the chief procurement officer role. How do you create value through procurement and supply chain levers in these branch-based businesses with dispersed assets and field-based workflow force? How do you create that value?
So, Balram, last 10 years, I've worked with field services, branch-based businesses. These are very distinct environment, very unconventional setting. We are dealing with a very decentralized organization with a dispersed footprint. From a supply chain and procurement perspective, I've generally focused on 4 areas. But first and the most important thing is supplier relationship. Without a strong supplier relationship, without a strong supplier selection process, these businesses, supply chain and procurement is not going to be successful in these businesses, especially in a field services environment where operations is dispersed. If the operation team doesn't feel comfortable with the suppliers or the subcontractors that procurement team is selecting, engagement is not going to be successful. So you have to get the operations involved. You have to get the business team involved right from the start. So they need to feel comfortable with the supplier selection, the supplier, and be a key part of the supplier relationship management process for this to be successful. So that's the first thing that we focus on is a supplier selection and supplier relationship. That's going to be key to a successful supply chain and a successful procurement program. The second thing is there's a big opportunity in these businesses, in these field-based businesses, in these services-based businesses, is by centralizing procurement. Can you leverage your spend? especially in categories where you have similar products or services or subcontractors that are being used across multiple portfolio businesses. Does it make sense for you to centralize? And this is generally a big lever that we pull. We have seen 20 to 30% saving in some categories, even 50% or more savings in some categories. So the purchasing is always done at the local level. A lot of time it's done by the operations folks, but centralizing the contracts is a big lever that we focus on.
Perfect.
Thirdly, I would say is managing risk and mitigating risk, especially in this environment. Us going through COVID, us going through the war in Ukraine, where there's a lot of supply chain disruptions happening, having a robust uh, risk management, risk mitigation strategy is a must. Each situation is going to be different. The solutions needs to be tailored. The approach needs to be tailored to your specific circumstances. But a couple of things that we have done is focusing on dual source strategy, making sure we have qualified suppliers and backup suppliers. That's one thing. The other thing is looking at on the inventory strategy. Inventory could be a cost and burden to the company, but having a strategic plan on how you're going to use your inventory to mitigate some of those risks. That's the third thing we focused on. And lastly, what I would say is the backbone of all of the things I've discussed is data analytics. It's an absolute fundamental for a well-run supply chain and procurement organization to be able to leverage the data in a timely fashion. You should be able to build analytics to gain insights into supply chain performance. You should leverage these insights to identify areas for improvements and make data-driven decisions. So when it comes to the 3 points I mentioned earlier, supplier relationships, centralizing procurement, and risk management, they're all supported by a robust data analytics capability. So those are the 4 areas that we are focused on how we create value through supply chain, through procurement for field services, and the branch-based businesses.
That is fantastic, and you crisply defined those 4 points. And from being a data guy, or on a data space, I would like to plop one more thing, like quality of data is equally as important. So as we from a data lens, when I see that doing such kind of insightful decisions that will come out of it, the quality is not up to at least good enough, it can impact the decisions that senior leadership will take. So yeah, but again, very crisply defined, Farrukh. Thank you for doing that. But that begs another question, like how do you ensure that the value created in sustainable and a decentralized organization will don't go back to their old habits or like old way of doing things? How do you ensure that doesn't happen?
That's a very good question, and that's something we have to be very mindful of. If you think of these field-based, branch-based services business, very decentralized organization, a lot of the procurement, a lot of the buying of these services and products is done at the local level. Centralized procurement might be defining how the contracts, managing the relationships, but the purchasing happened at the field level, far away from the central team. If we don't have, so where it starts is engaging the field organization, engaging the operations, engaging the businesses early on in the process, so they buy into the changes that we're making. Change is always going to be hard, and you've been doing business and you've been working with your suppliers, your contractors for a number of years. There could be guys living down the street or church members you've been going, you have association with for the last 10, 20 years, or your brother-in-law that you're procuring these services from. Yeah. So making those changes could be hard. Yep. So you have to make sure, we focus on 2 things. One is making sure operations team is fully bought in. Yep. And is part of the decision-making process early on. And then secondly, once we have the programs in place, contracts negotiated, that there is a governance process that we are monitoring. Are the folks using the right programs? Are they going through the right suppliers? There's always going to be exceptions, and you have to deal with that. But get them engaged early on, but on the other hand, have a governance process that you're monitoring that these programs are being used and they are working as they were supposed to.
Awesome. That's a golden nugget right there. So thanks for that, Farrukh. So
Yeah.
yeah.
One other thing I would say is we see is not only the programs are being used by the operations team that that opted into these programs. The second thing is that some of the savings that they're generating or the productivity that they're generating is not passed to the customers. And I'm not saying it should never be passed to the customers, but that needs to be a business decision. Very often, if we have such savings negotiated, it can um, it can be repriced back to the customer without the knowledge of the management team. So how you are doing the new quotes and how your estimation team is building these quotes, they need to be on the same page on what value with these new negotiated contracts are we keeping versus we are giving we're giving back to our customers. But that needs to be a business decision, and if you're not vigilant, a lot of that value is sometimes leaked, and you don't see the margin appreciation that you may have in your business case when you've negotiated these contracts.
Awesome. That's great. So I mean I've seen the negotiation piece, like it's what kind of what type of approaches that you should take depending upon the suppliers, and the way that you have done it's like, so can you share some of those strategies that you use to negotiate the best possible prices from these suppliers?
Yeah, I think our suppliers, our vendors um, are an extension of our company. We always, I think the first rule is that we always want to interact with them, negotiate with them um, in good faith. We want them to be successful and we want us to be successful. We are going to be competitive. We're going to try to get the best value, but we want them to succeed as well.
Yep.
I think the most important thing is we should be prepared. Nothing, there's no strategy or nothing you can do during the negotiation that eclipses, the value of being prepared and doing the homework before the negotiation starts. Um, One of the hardest thing, and it goes back to data and it goes back to some of these businesses, um, is do we know what is our cost baseline? Do we know where are we spending our money? How much does it cost? Not just maybe the product or services, but what's the total cost of ownership of some of these products and services that we're using? So doing the homework, understanding our baseline cost, understanding our total cost and our value proposition is extremely important. The second thing is what I focus on is not just never negotiate on just one thing. I'll give you an example. If you look at rental equipment category, price is only one of the multiple things that you negotiate, right? There's a number of different terms that you're negotiating. Price of the product is absolutely a fundamental thing, but for example, there could be a lot of different service fees. There could be payment terms. There could be um, there could be environmental fees, and there could be timing things, and when we are returning and when we're getting these equipment back. There could be service level agreement on how many times when we go to a rental house, they should have the equipment available when we need them. There could be proration of, when are you, how long are you charged if you're returning the equipment after 2 days or 4 days or 6 days, right? So there's a number of aspects that can be negotiated. So I think you should always go in, not only focus on price, but the total cost of ownership of that product or service that you're going to be getting from that vendor.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, like, just to touch on one important topic of ESG initiatives, right? As a chief procurement officer, what role do you see yourself playing in driving the ESG initiatives? Throughout the organization, the data again is the cornerstone for ESG, and where do you get that data, and how are you utilizing it? Yeah, can you shed some light on it?
So from an ESG standpoint, there's a number of things in my previous role in different engagements that we have focused on, a lot of time is driven by our customers, and our customers are demanding this. We support a lot of diversity initiatives. We have grown a lot of our diverse suppliers. I have a number of examples where we have taken a mom and pop, supplier, and made them into a regional or a national vendor over time. So diversity was something we really focused on. And that was something that was important to us, and that was something that was important to our customers. Over the last 2 years, you have seen it, I've seen it, is, fuel price increases.
Yep.
So there was a number of things that we did internally to monitor utilization of our equipment, and the usage of our fuel. So there was a lot of programs that we put in place on and focus on ESG and focus on fuel usage. So one of the things, for example, we did was we monitored the idling of our equipment. What percentage of the time our on-road trucks or off-road equipment is being idled? Now, some level of idling is always going to be there, in normal usage, but if there's excess idling, that's not good for our bottom line, and it's not good for the environment. So things like that is how procurement and supply chain can help with the ESG initiatives.
Awesome. This is great. This is great. So maybe we'll change a little bit of into the fleet side of the domain, like on a fleet management side, right? You touched around the initiatives around negotiations, and again tracking and vehicle usage, and can you talk to us a little bit about how do you utilize the data analytics to optimize the vehicle usage?
So in my previous engagement, we rolled out cameras and telematics to our entire fleet. It's a heavy lift to do that, to get all your fleet be implemented with these cameras and telematics devices. But once you have that rolled out and you have a program in place, that gives you a lot of visibility in terms of the usage of your equipment, where is the equipment at all given times, and also from a safety perspective, if the equipment and the fleet being used within the company's defined policies, and if it's being used in a safe manner. So we absolutely focus on that. One of the with the rollout of these telematic devices, what we were able to do is across all of our companies, we had a comprehensive view of what our utilization looked like. We had a unified view of what is the utilization of our equipment. Once we had that, then once we understood our baseline, we could start developing policies and set targets on what should be the right utilization. And based on that utilization, we could then regulate what do we need to do in terms of our leasing of our fleet, what do we need to do in terms of renting of our fleet, and also really encouraged our internal business units, internal regions to think about, hey, can we steer our equipment in a more efficient manner? So the data analytics that we got from our telematics, from our cameras, was absolutely the key for us to improve our utilization and really have a big impact on savings on our OPEX and our CAPEX dollars.
Awesome. So like again, this change, getting data and insights is one, and more awareness around how the utilization is happening, and then managing the behaviors of the drivers, with this data. So how do you manage the drivers' behaviors and using the telematics data and other metrics that you just mentioned?
The primary driver for us to have the cameras in the vehicles was to make sure we protect our drivers, our employees, and anybody else that's going to be that we share the road with. This was a really important initiative for us. With all of these cameras installed, what we had to do was come up with our policies on what is it that we want to measure. There's a number of different things that you can measure, right? Are you wearing a seat belt? Are you speeding? What's the following distance? are you harsh braking? Are you the way you're turning and things like that. So we have to sit down with our safety team and then also with our telematics partners to define exactly what are the behaviors that are within our policy and the ones that we need to flag. You have to calibrate it exactly to the way that you want to, the way, how you want people to behave in accordance with your policy. So we have to carefully carefully devise what, how you want to calibrate and how you want to measure this behavior. So this was done meticulously. Once it was done, we were able to capture all of the different violations that our cameras were picking. We developed we developed a program on how we're going to be reviewing these violations, how we're going to be addressing it, how we're going to be coaching it, how we're going to be tracking it, and how we're going to be sharing that information back with our employees. So it really highlighted areas of opportunities, areas of improvement for us. So that was done on the safety side. Once we gave this information back on the utilization, on the telematics, on the cameras back to our businesses, it always surprises me. People can use this information in different ways than you may have anticipated. So one of the things, for example, one of our businesses picked up that there were drivers that were driving too much, right? So generally you want to have high utilization, but what they saw is these drivers were driving 3,000, 4,000 miles a month. So what they concluded is that these guys that are driving so much should actually be hoteling. They should be staying in a hotel somewhere and not be coming back home every night. So that is also from a safety standpoint, that was something that was highlighted that, too little utilization is bad for our assets, that our assets are not getting utilized, but sometimes way too much utilization could be a safety hazard that these folks are driving back and forth while they should be, when they're working somewhere remote, should be staying the night over there rather than coming back every time. So there was a lot of different ways that the data helped us, both on the utilization side and on our safety side.
Awesome. I think I do remember, like, we should also be sensitive around the utilization, especially the utilization metric, how it has been viewed by each operating company, because sometimes, the machine, the truck might be running because it's cold outside, so that maybe the driver wants to be a little warm, right? Maybe that's idling is a required idling. It's not like a careless idling that's happening, that was burning the fuel. So there are some kind, I believe there is such kind of soft areas around it, but at a very high level, I think tracking utilization is a key metric. I thought like that's one topic was very interesting for me then.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I would say is that there's probably in a lot of these services business, field-based businesses, a lot of time a lot of energy is spent on, hey, do we know exactly how do we measure utilization? Hey, should we be based on this much mileage or this many hours in a day? I think it's very hard to get to a perfect answer.
Yes.
But I think we need to draw line in the sand.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if it's the exact calculation or not, but we need to start measuring ourselves. If they're sister business units, how do we measure against each other? Or more importantly, how do we measure against ourselves over time? So I would say having a good calculation is great, but don't wait for a precise calculation before you start measuring yourself. It's more important to draw a line in the sand and say, this is how we're going to calculate. This is what we call utilization, and let's start tracking, and let's start improving on that over time.
Excellent point. So again, we'll dive into the last segment, and this is great information for. So I can keep on talking to you forever, but the supply chain area, that's the domain I want to touch into. Like, what did you do to improve supply chain visibility and transparency? Can you share some thoughts?
So for us, our supply chain, we were going through during the COVID, as you may know, a lot of the OEMs were struggling with big equipment, big trucks, big trailers, and the supply chains were disrupted. So our lead time, when they could be normally 2 to 3 months, were now 8 to 10 months lead time. So we really did struggle with that. What we had to do, working with our internal folks and external partners, have a very clear view of our supply and demand, or when new equipment, new machinery, new fleet, or new assets are required. So the first thing we had to do was get a clear view of when our current equipment, current leases, current own equipment, how long can we use them? Where can we extend them? So from our supply side, we had to get a very good picture of when are we getting equipment and assets from our OEMs, but the assets that we own, which ones can we extend, which can go through another PM cycle, which can go through another maintenance cycle to extend the lifetime. If we have a leased equipment, where can we extend or go on month-to-month lease, or where can we go negotiate and extend our lease for these equipment? So we had to have a very clear view of our supply from the OEMs and our existing assets. What is their total expected life, and where can that be extended? And then from our demand standpoint, what work are we currently performing? What future work will we be performing? We had to get a very clear picture, and sometimes it's not all our projects are confirmed, so you have to have a best guess or have a probability of when these assets will be needed. So we had to, it was a very delicate balance. We had to have a very clear view of our supply when things are coming in and match it very closely to our demand. So sometimes we had to really work with our OEMs to expedite things or transfer assets between the different companies, or even go to rental houses when we had a shortfall. So for all of that, having a telematics information, having visibility of where the equipment is internally, what can be transferred, was extremely key for us.
Yeah. Anything else that comes to mind to handle any supply chain disruptions?
From a supply chain disruption, as I mentioned before, the supplier relationship matters a lot. If you have a good supplier relationship, they will bend over backwards to make sure that they can minimize the disruptions. So that's what we've relied on, is having the good long-term supplier relationships. And what we focused on was a number of times we had to focus on, do we have a dual source strategy? Some of our contracts mentioned, we can only procure from one source and one suppliers. We had to be very forthcoming with them. When we were really facing disruptions in the market, we had to get exceptions from them. Hey, you are our sole supplier. That's according to a contract, but this is a special circumstance, and that's why we're using a secondary. So we had to be clear with them, and I think the supplier relationship is the key to this, to making this work, especially in tough times when you're having disruptions.
Awesome. So time just flies, Farrukh. It's amazing conversation, and I hope the viewers have enjoyed. There's a lot of things to unpack here, and we'll put some information on the show notes so that you guys could, the audience can get much more deeper in case they need. And Farrukh, tell how the audience can reach out to you. Where are you available on LinkedIn or anywhere they could connect with you, and they might have some questions, leave comments. We will respond to you or on this video. And where are you available, Farrukh? Tell us, how can the folks reach you?
Absolutely. I think if you can put in my LinkedIn profile,
Will do.
They can absolutely reach me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to share my email if someone wants to get in touch.
Perfect. So that said, we want to be mindful about your time and also the audience time. And thank you again for this wonderful session. We're hoping to bring more. If there are any actionable context topics that you guys are interested or have some guests, experts in the fields that would come and add value for our day-to-day businesses, please suggest us in the comments, or you can all just drop a note directly to me. So thanks again, Farrukh. Thank you very much for your time and some valuable insights that you have provided us. You guys all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Balram.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.